All right, what's up, y'all? I'm Jason Luttrell from the Supplier Summit. I'm so excited to welcome Patrick Smith from the USHG, Union Square Hospitality Group. And Patrick's job is really interesting. He just opens bars. So for the last 18 months, he's opened 6 or so bars. Is that correct?
Yep, thereabouts.
Yeah, so that's a lot of bars, a lot of balls in the air all the time. So Patrick's going to walk us through his philosophy and strategy for both buyers and sellers to develop meaningful, long-lasting relationships and partnerships with supplier vendors. Patrick, thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure, and I will just share my screen. Just
thank you.
And yeah, so I'll just get going. This presentation is called A Professional Bar Opener's Guide to Buying Booze. I've spent the last 18 months or so working on new or reopening concepts within my restaurant group, Union Square Hospitality Group. And I've found that it is a uniquely fruitful moment to really get off on the right foot with supplier partners as a buyer, as a restaurant operator, but also a great moment for suppliers to get off on the right foot with buyers. And so I thought, over the last 18 months, I've developed some best practices just due to the repetition of it, having done it in so many different contexts and with so many different types of programs, that I thought it would be nice to share. And so really, I'm going to be targeting this to suppliers and to buyers. And I hope that both parties will be able to get something out of this. I really feel like there's a big gap that can be bridged. And I think that's probably a lot of why this Supplier Summit exists, but a gap that can be bridged between suppliers and buyers. And so I hope that by coming together and really understanding each other and understanding each other's motivations and KPIs, we can really develop some really fruitful partnerships and not waste each other's time. So if you are a supplier and you are watching me right now, welcome. It's nice to see you. And what I hope for you to get out of this is listed on my screen here. And really, I'm just hoping for you to get a little bit of empathy around what it takes to open a bar, really from the beverage director's perspective. Some of you have done this before. Some of you came to your roles in the industry from outside of the bar and restaurant space. And so maybe you haven't been exposed to this process. And so for those folks who are watching, I hope to really be able to shine a light on that for you. I think you are also in a unique position to be very helpful to buyers in some very specific ways in this particular moment. Their resources are different. Their time is different than when the restaurant is in full operation. And you have seen some unique opportunities there. And then really, when a buyer is in the process of opening their establishment and writing their program, things are flexible, things are moldable, and you have a great moment, a great opportunity to kind of get in on the ground floor. And while things are still being set, you can kind of make your imprint on their programming from an early stage and hopefully become a dyed-in-the-wool part of their programming from opening day onward. Buyers, hello, if you are watching, it's nice to see you as well. And for you, I'm really just hoping to, as someone who sits on your side of the aisle, just kind of share some of my learnings over the past 18 months and help you as you go about your new openings, should you have any coming up in your career. But this also is helpful for if you are working in a place that's already well established and the doors are already open. So for you, how to build that really daunting opening liquor order, going from an empty back bar to a full back bar in one fell swoop. How to really manage and approach supplier partnerships while you are conceiving of your programming for the first time. And then a few questions that you should really ask yourself or ask other people, depending on the structure of your business. And these answers to these questions will really help you design a program that's built to suit your space, your programming, and your needs. So we'll just go through these 6 components, and that'll be the foundation of this talk. So on we go. We'll start with suppliers. So what does it take to open a bar? It is something that I didn't know going into the process myself. I had not opened any establishments prior to starting my role about 18 months ago. And so obviously it requires lots of time, in some very specific ways. It's a little bit of a hurry up and wait moment, if you're familiar with that phrase from military speak. It's run, 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 and then you hit a roadblock and you wait. And then you run, 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 and now it's opening week. I come from a theater background in high school. We had like Hell Week, right? Hell Week is a real thing when you're opening an establishment. It takes lots of money, obviously, but what kind of money, and how is that money get spent? This is a moving target for how well funded the bar's operation is, but it really separates into a number of buckets, which we have here on the right side of the screen. The opening order itself, all of the liquor, beer, consumables that will be then turned around and sold to guests. We've got bar tools and CGS, which stands for China, Glass, and Silver. So, plateware and glassware, things like that. These items need to really be designed. The order manifests need to be designed. Dollar figures need to be attached to them. Usually this involves a very long, arduous spreadsheet where we wind up being able to go to our business partner or our boss or simply our own bank account if we are running our own business here, and really be able to say, I'm spending X amount on liquor consumables, I'm spending this amount on bar tools, I'm spending this amount on CGS. Orders fire off, and now we wait, that hurry up and wait moment. It requires a lot of flexibility to open a bar. As I've been saying, you never know how you're going to be spending your time on any given day. Some days you might be on site at your property all day long into the evening. Sometimes you might not be there at all. It requires vision. Of course, buyers don't open properties for no reason. At least most of us don't. And that reason is your vision. So what are you hoping to add to your to the food and beverage space in your community, in your city? Why do I envision guests coming to my establishment? What am I hoping to be proud of? What am I going to be notable for? And really knowing the answer to that is very important. And then reliable and flexible partners. As much as you need to be flexible as a buyer, as an operator, so too your partners need to be. Budgets change, and so your investors need to be willing to scale up or scale down, but usually scale up the amount of money that it's going to take to get the doors open. I'm sure you're familiar, if you are a supplier, that the target moves quite a lot in terms of that opening liquor order and kind of what the programming looks like. So flexibility on the part of the suppliers themselves is very important. And then staff. I mean, I've had moments where we've been about to bring on hourly staff within my restaurant group, and then the opening date shifts and we need to send out some unfortunate communications to the effect of, we need to wait another few weeks for you to come on board and start training. And then flexibility from the community, as the opening date shifts, as your programming shifts. And then we have this dialogue from pre-open to post-open that happens between your community, your regulars, your patrons, and what you envisioned the bar being in the first place, which aren't always the exact same thing. But that's a topic for another talk. So with that in mind, and that sort of being what it takes to open a bar, how can a supplier step in and be useful to a buyer within that context? So earlier I said that time and money both look differently to a buyer than it does when they're within an opening. And in some ways, it means that they actually have potentially more time than they would otherwise, and specifically time in the evening when they would ordinarily be in service. This is a good time to really get to know the buyer. And I actually am a big advocate as a buyer and operator of going on R&D trips to specifically other recently opened businesses. You as a supplier can fund that. But as a buyer, I'm really looking to see, what is on their back bar, what do their china, glass, and silver look like? What is their menu design like? Because really, any restaurant in a given community operates within the same framework and with the same product availability, more or less, as everybody else. So you can really latch on to other people's great ideas or not so great ideas, and adjust your opening programming or china, glass, silver, or liquor appropriately, depending on your research trips to recently opened businesses. And then one that is top of mind right now, because we're organizing this for a new opening within my company, is when we have staff come in to start training, hourly staff, they need to be fed family meal. This is always the case for our restaurants, but it is oftentimes within a restaurant that is not actually making any significant amount of food yet. And so they can't leverage that economy of scale to cook a bunch of pasta or make a bunch of salad or whatever it is. And you as a supplier can step in and foot the bill for a catered lunch for the staff. And that actually takes an organizational load off of the buyer. And it also saves a line item from the opening budget. So we talk about ways to support. This is an excellent way to support. So a supplier can be useful to a buyer also in transparency, and transparency is a word I'm going to say a lot over the rest of the course of the talk. And really, it comes down to, again, the buyer and the supplier understanding each other, right? So transparency. If you're a supplier, you should be in a position where you can say to the buyer, here's what I can and what I cannot commit to in terms of supporting. And by support, I mean financial support, but also other forms of support, time spent, getting to know the staff, whatever the case may be. And understanding also that financial support is often a moving target depending on how much volume is being done at the establishment, but you can share those metrics as well. A key phrase that I keep coming back to is, what are your KPIs? What are your key performance indicators? So this is something that ideally the buyer should know what the supplier's KPIs are, and the supplier should know what the buyer's KPIs are. So me going into an opening, when I meet with the supplier partner, it's one of the first things out of my mouth. What are your KPIs? And this is something that even outside of the context of an opening, we should be prepared to talk about. But when we're establishing a new relationship, it's also a great moment. And so if you as a supplier are able to come to the table and say to the buyer, we're really looking for 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% menu share on the menu cocktails. We're looking for XYZ in the well. We're looking for back bar representation of this particular family of tequila and these Scotch SKUs and everything like this, or whatever it is that is your recent charge from your bosses. If you're able to share that with the buyer from the outset, it doesn't mean that the buyer will necessarily be able to fulfill that ask, but it does mean that at least the buyer is more well informed, right? And then being able to share what supply issues are at hand in upcoming months. Can't tell you how many times I have tried to put a particular product onto an opening cocktail menu and then gotten bitten when I found out that the next shipment isn't arriving in the States for another 6 weeks, and that's something that I could have found out about had I asked. And so being able to get out in front of that is very, very important. So we can also come to the table with an understanding of each other's perspectives. And so if you're a supplier, your job is, of course, to champion and sell your products. In some way, this is me putting words in your mouth because I've never been on the supplier side before, but I can only presume that that's an accurate statement. And then I would ask you to ask yourself, what is the buyer's job? And then I would go back to this slide and we can talk about that, right? So understand that your goals are related, but they're not necessarily the same. And that's okay. But this way you can play on the same team in a more honest and productive way. So setting a foundation for lasting partnerships, we've gotten in the door, we've spoken to the buyer, we've shared our KPIs. And then how does that turn into not just a couple of menu placements or a couple of well placements that then go away in a few months when the next hot item comes along. And this is where developing a relationship is really important. So I like to start on aligning on shared values. I will often just share what the creative vision is for the concept with the supplier. And hopefully the supplier is interested to hear that. Sharing, why is it that we're opening this place? Why is it that I've selected the number of cocktails that I'm going to be putting on the menu? What is the spread of cocktails and why did I choose this spread of cocktails and not that spread? What am I hoping guests get really excited about? In marketing and PR circles, people talk about, like, if you could write your own headline in the New York Times, what would that headline say, right? So sharing things like that, and then really allowing the buyer and the supplier to sort of dream big together about what the vision of the project is, will allow a sort of a bond to form. And then can you as a supplier get inspired by what the buyer is putting together? And we're really trying to avoid what I call the switcheroo, which I'm sure you are all very familiar with. I succeeded in getting a menu placement, and then all of a sudden I come in a few weeks or a few months later, and that menu placement has switched to a competitor's product with no notice. Like I said, I've never been on the supplier side before, but I know it happens, and I'm sure it does not feel good when it happens. So how do we avoid that? Well, I would just say easy come, easy go. If we don't have a rock solid foundation and partnership pre-established, then the buyer feels a little bit unmoored in what their partnerships really are, and that can result in moving around and going to the sort of the flavor of the day. And if we really start together with the foundation of we're partnering for the future and we both understand this, this is a long-term thing, then you're much likely to see success out of the opening gate, but also 6 or 12 or 18 months down the line. Okay, so buyers, hello. How do we construct our opening liquor order? And this is, of course, a mindset shift for the presentation, hoping to now be able to speak more to the buyers than the suppliers, although I hope this is still interesting for suppliers. Really, we're on a fact-finding mission when we get into the property for the first time, when we crack open that project for the first time. And the first question I'm going to ask myself or my partners or my investors is, what is my target standing inventory dollar amount? That's not necessarily the same as your opening liquor order itself, but on a given month, when you count your inventory, I want my inventory to be standing at X thousands of dollars of product. So a fairly small one might be, $8,000 to $10,000, $5,000. A really, really huge liquor inventory might break 6 figures. But where do you fall in that mix? And that's going to allow you to kind of allocate this pie chart of what liquor you're going to be carrying in that space. But if you don't know your target, you're not going to be able to set an intelligently placed order out there into the universe. So once you know your opening inventory amount, we're going to be asking about or thinking about quantity discounts versus your money and also your space considerations, right? So most markets, at least New York, where I'm most familiar with, as you buy more liquor, the price generally goes down. Sometimes more for certain products than others, but I think we all basically understand that dynamic. And so for which SKUs are you hoping to really put down a large investment and tie up a lot of money in a lot of your storage space in one particular product to achieve a really advantageous cost per ounce? And so for that, we're really looking at your cocktail menu placements and for your well placements. So for example, if I am picking up a vodka that is going to be going in my well and in a cocktail, or a tequila that's going in a cocktail, I know, or I'm pretty sure, that it's going to sell very well and very quickly. And so it behooves me to pick up, rather than 6 bottles, if I can afford it and if I have the space for it, to pick up 12, 24, 3 cases, 5 cases, 10 cases, however much is appropriate for the product, for your programming, and again, for your money and your space. But thinking about that, and then when you go into actually construct the order in probably Excel, I like to break it out by distributor. So in New York, it's Empire and Southern and Skurnik and Winebow and all these other friends of mine. But you will basically, your goal is to get your opening order into a format that's easily transmittable to your supplier partners. And so I will be putting all of my Empire products into one chunk of my spreadsheet, along with the dollar amount, the quantity, and that's all going to flow to my total order amount. And then I have a sum of my total order amounts from all of my distributors that is going to roll up into my total order for my entire opening liquor order, right? And that's something that takes a lot of my time when I open up a new project, is constructing that order. But once I've actually done that, and I've gone through the process of painstakingly allocating the funds and the space, thinking about if I pick up 12 bottles of this, I won't be able to pick up 6 bottles of that, whatever the case may be. I've now got a final order in front of me. And let's say it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks until it's time for the liquor to arrive on site. There's no reason why I can't send that to my suppliers well in advance of that. So I like to just copy that spreadsheet, send it off to my rep at my distributor partners, and say, this is my anticipated opening order. Things may change, but I would like to schedule this delivery for X date, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks in the future. And can you set aside some product for me? Or if there are stock issues, let me know now. And this is why advance notice is very important, is because we can get out ahead of out of stock issues. So that is a long way to say some of my strategies around constructing an opening liquor order. Obviously a much larger subject, but let's move on. So we talked about how a supplier can work with a buyer to achieve benefit for the supplier. How can the buyer also get a little bit of benefit out of the mix? It should be a mutually beneficial partnership, of course. And so again, I come back to transparency. And so what are your KPIs as a buyer, right? Are you looking for financial support? What kind of financial support are you looking for? There are many different flavors of financial support. Some suppliers engage in certain formats. Some suppliers engage in other formats. Are you hoping to achieve notoriety? Are you hoping to achieve press? Are you hoping to get your bartenders into cocktail competitions? Are you just hoping to fill the space with as many people as you can on any given night? Are you hoping for events? Right? And so understanding that about yourself so you can communicate that to your supplier partners is very important. And then being able to say to your supplier partner, I expect our relationship to look like this. I expect you to champion our program, not just by being on site, but also by spreading the good word around town as you visit your other accounts. Hey, you know what? They're really crushing it over at Spot X, right? Or helping us source staff. Suppliers are the eyes and ears. They go around the city in ways that even bar regulars don't normally get around as much as suppliers do. So they really are on the ground. They're sort of those foot soldiers of knowing what's happening in a given market. And that can be very valuable to a buyer. And then here's what we don't do and don't do. And this is something that a buyer should be able to answer, but also a supplier. And so what we do and what we don't do really is emblematic of where are we standing on compliance. And obviously, USHG strongly on the side of compliance in all ways at all times, and really just being able to communicate your mindset around compliance and what's important to you in a very transparent way right out the gate, so that there's no misunderstandings in the future. Longevity. This is the other side of the coin of that switcheroo concept, right? So I really value being able to go to a supplier and saying to them, I expect that we're going to be partnering for the next 6 months, for the next 1 year, for the next 2 years, for however long I'm involved in this project. We're going to be partnering. Now, that doesn't mean that a cocktail placement won't go away, but if it goes away, maybe it's replaced by another cocktail placement within that same portfolio, right? So if I agree with the supplier partner to say, on my 10 cocktail menu, I'm going to look to get you anywhere between 2 to 5 cocktails that call your products, then the supplier can kind of hang their hat on that. And as it says on the slide, you can really count on me, the buyer, to keep my commitments in a world where buyers often don't keep their commitments, not always in a nefarious way, but just the winds of change blow and things happen. But in that storm, you can count on me to keep my commitments. So that's a valuable thing for a supplier to hear, and it makes them want to work with you, the buyer. So shared values. Are you able to communicate your vision, and have you communicated your vision to the supplier partner? And when you do so, do their eyes glaze over, or do they get it? Do they get excited, right? And that really means that your supplier partner is buying into the concept in a deep way, and it's going to allow you, like I said, to kind of dream big. And again, remembering what your perspective is and what the supplier's perspective is coming into this relationship. Your job as a buyer is to build and sustain a successful bar program in whatever way you define success. Financial success, notoriety, sick programming, whatever it is that you care about, you are trying to achieve success in your bar program, which is an obvious statement. But then ask yourself, what is the supplier's job? When your program succeeds, they succeed too, but it's an indirectly related goal, right? The supplier's job is to champion and sell their products, right? And so keeping that in mind and making sure, again, that we both understand where each other is coming from, very important. So questions that you should ask yourself if you're a buyer. We've kind of been tiptoeing around some of this, right? What does success look like for my bar program? When I walk into my post-opening bar and it's busy as hell, what am I seeing and smiling about, right? And I'm not going to get into the details of what I've written here, but success can be measured in many different ways. So what does success look like for you? What is your opening budget? And that is, of course, related to the opening liquor order itself, but this rolls up into everything, including your CGS order, your bar tools order, what is your labor budget, what is your staff par. The sooner you can find the answers to these questions, the sooner you're going to be able to allocate funds and adjust your programming accordingly to avoid, to whatever extent possible, to avoid surprises, right? When are we opening? That's an important question to ask. And I've never worked on an opening that didn't move, but what is our target date? If you're really lucky, you have a good couple of months in the future. with which to plan your program. If you're very unlucky, if you're coming in at the last minute, it could be far less time than that. But nonetheless, when are we opening and what roadblocks do we anticipate? You know, are we waiting on the liquor license? Are we waiting on furniture? Are we waiting on kitchen gear? And what are those external factors that might delay me that none of us can really control, right? And then again, what am I looking for in a supplier partner? You should really be able to answer this question before you ever speak to a supplier. What does success look like in terms of that supplier relationship for you? And I would say the same to suppliers. What does success look like in a partnership with a buyer? So in conclusion, we've covered some things for suppliers and for buyers, but I would just say know yourself is a way to sum up a lot of what we've been discussing. So where does my product fit in context with my peers? And product is a purposefully generic statement to say product can literally mean liquor in bottles that you sell to on-premise accounts, or it can mean an experience that you sell to guests in your restaurant. So where does my restaurant or where does my product fit in context with my peers? And then do I know what success looks like for me? Transparency. If you took anything away from this, it's that transparency is never a bad idea, and it is always a good idea. So I know what success looks like for me. Do my partners know what success looks like for me? Have I communicated that? Or is it just in my brain by itself? And then conversely, do I know what success looks like for my partners? If they haven't volunteered that information, can I ask them? And remembering that an opening is a time to look forward. So really being able to come to that table with the mindset that what we build now is going to stand the test of time. When I design an opening cocktail menu, some of them are more evergreen than others in terms of the literal offerings, but the partnerships that are established, I hope to really bake into the foundation of that program and let them perpetuate themselves in perpetuity until something happens, until I leave, or until a supplier gets bought, or a product is no longer available, or whatever the case may be. Really being able to go into your opening understanding my partnerships are with this person, and this person. It looks like this. This is what we expect out of this person. This is what we expect out of that person. And then being able to look forward into the future and say, in 2 years, this partnership is going to look like this. So that's all I have to say about that. And
well, that's a lot, man.
That is coming off of mute.
Yeah, that's an enormous amount of information. And it's a lot more depth than I've been a part of many, many openings. Openings typically suck. And I've got a few follow-up questions for you.
Sure.
First of all, how do you manage so many projects at the same time? I mean, the 6 bars in 18 months, I'm assuming that they were not all in cut and dry beginning and ending, and they just one started after the other. How do you manage multiple concurrent openings?
Well, your assumption is in some ways correct, and in some ways, thankfully, not correct. And so we have been fortunate in my particular circumstance to have somewhat of a chronological cadence to all of this. But I can answer your question by saying that even though my primary focus is on openings, I do then once a place is open, I do maintain a little bit of a presence at the property once it has opened its doors, to make sure that these things that we've been talking about are staying top of mind. And so juggling open properties with not open properties is something that I'm maybe a little bit more familiar with. I guess I would say it's about just being transparent again with what you can and cannot do with your time. I need to be here at this time, so unfortunately I cannot help you with this at this very moment. But if I'm able to stop by tomorrow I can help you out instead. And just being clear that it's not because I don't care about your project. It's not because I don't care about you. It's not because I don't want to help. But I can only be in so many places at once, and I can't do this, but can I do that?
But surely there is some economy of scale.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things that I really like about the restaurant group that I work for is I think we have a nice mix of economy of scale and really standardizing processes and systems and sharing those resources like, payroll or whatever, while at the same time having our programming and our ethos and the aesthetic of each property really be purposefully siloed off from each other and allow the teams on site, the operators, the general managers, the beverage directors, the chefs, allowing them the freedom and the leeway to develop their programs in the way that they best see fit.
Well, I forgot to mention this in the beginning. This is a pre-recorded interview because you've been so generous with your time and you were on leave to take care of your 7-month-old daughter, which is amazing. But I do have another question from the buyer's perspective. So you work for a large company, and and that affords the luxury of having a highly specialized role of somebody who just goes around and from bar to bar to bar and opens things. If you were working in a much smaller operation, and if you were, say, the owner or a GM or a partner in a bar, and you had to prioritize some of these things that you were talking about. I mean, you're talking about having like articulated inventory control, articulated understanding of the what relationship the bar is like. What would you prioritize about what you do? What would be like the 3 things that you would prioritize for opening up a bar if you were also responsible for operations and marketing and sales and purchasing?
Yeah. Well, I guess what I hear you asking, let me make sure I understand. In a moment where you wear so many more hats than what I wear, when you are not just the beverage director, but you're also maybe the general manager, maybe you're also the marketing director, maybe sometimes you're also the executive chef in certain moments.
Right.
What do you prioritize? And so I guess I would say top of mind for me would be that vision. Can we all align on the vision? Why is it that we're here? Restaurants and bars are a hard industry. They demand a lot of time and energy, and we can do anything else in the world, but we choose to do this, right? So why are you here? You personally, but also why is your establishment here? What is it here to say to the world? Being able to answer that question consistently while you're wearing these different hats and at different moments in the day, in the good times and the bad times, I think is a really powerful way to center yourself as you keep taking off hats and putting on different ones. And then I would say, now that we've had our sort of lofty philosophical alignment, let's get into the numbers and make sure that we're aligned financially. Building out a kitchen and building out a bar program in many ways is a zero-sum game, right? And so if you put on your I'm running the kitchen hat and you say, oh, I need to buy a new oven or range or the hood needs cleaning or whatever, and then you take off that hat and you put on your bar hat and you say, oh my God, it'd be really cool to have draft cocktails or whatever the case. Then being able to square those two competing desires and being able to put them both in front of how much money you have and be able to make an informed decision is really valuable, because you wouldn't want to make a decision that makes no sense out of context of the rest of your business, right? So I know that was only 2, but that feels right to me.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, it reminds me of the Simon Sinek book, Start With Why. And one of the examples that they use in that book is ask yourself why 3 times. Like, why is that important? Okay, well, why is that important? All right, well, why is that important? And getting the whole team aligned on a singular vision, and then the things, everything cascading from that tend to sort themselves out.
Yeah.
All right. So my next question is say I'm a buyer. You have a lot of buying power, and you mentioned to me earlier, maybe it was in this conversation or one of our previous ones, that you make the time to meet new suppliers. And I just wanted to point out that it's oftentimes for especially new or entrepreneur-owned products, that the only marketing opportunity that they have is cold calling, where they actually knock on your door and say, "Hello, my name is Jason from XYZ Plum Liqueur. We just came to market," and they don't do billboard advertising. They don't advertise and imbibe. They don't do digital marketing. They have a person on the street. Sometimes it's the owner of the brand that's knocking on doors saying, "Hey, so how does one get that meeting with you?"
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, as I know all of you suppliers are very aware. Buyers have a magic knack of not being available when you show up at their door for a cold call. And in some ways, it's just a fact of life, and it's unfortunate. I wish it weren't the case. But I can say that my philosophy personally is I always try to take the meeting if I can. This is a human being at the very least, right? And it's someone who's chosen to take the time to come to my door. And I know I see many of them every week, but it doesn't change the fact that this is a person with inherent value and with a story to tell, and it behooves me to hear that story. And so if I can speak to the buyers for a moment, I would say, see what you can do to make the time for that person, even though it's very difficult and you are wearing many hats. Maybe you have a schedule to make. Maybe you have a pre-shift to run. Maybe you have to bartend that night or be a sommelier on the floor or whatever. And you literally can't be in multiple places at once. But if you can find the 5 minutes or the 30 seconds to just shake a person's hand and exchange business cards, and then if the answer is no, the answer is no. But I always try to take that meeting. The other thing I would say is authenticity and passion really shine themselves through. And I can remember a particular moment, this was before COVID, but I had a supplier cold call, and to your point, it was literally the owner. And this was a supplier out of the Midwest that's independently owned. And the owner of the company just stopped into where I was working and just very humbly and transparently said, "This is my gin. I'd love for you to try it. I made it." And it was really hard to not, look that person in the eye. And before I knew it, it was 11:30 a.m. and I was tasting gin, which is not something that I normally like to do, but it was great. And I picked up a case of it on the spot, just because it was a person who really believed in what they were doing, and had a product that spoke to me, but they also had a story to tell that was an authentic story, and it was a very compelling thing to listen to.
Well, that's hopefully that's inspiring to some people. It's also not a license to pitch, right? I mean, you probably prefer an email and an appointment, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, I would always prefer an appointment, of course. And I would say also, like, if you can, if it has to be a cold call, it has to be a cold call. Like you said, some instances, that's the only thing that's possible. If it can be something more than a cold call, the chances of success go up tremendously. And so I very frequently have suppliers come to me and say, I would love an introduction to the buyer at property X within my company. And what I always say to them is, I'm going to take your sort of elevator pitch, and I'm going to bring it to the buyer next time I see them and say, would you like an introduction with this person? And when they say yes, I'm going to introduce you. But what I don't do is I don't just provide an email intro with a person that with a buyer, between a buyer and a supplier that don't know each other, because at that point I am doing a cold call and I am an intermediary, and it's in some ways it's self-preservation because I don't want to turn into noise for my buyers, but it also serves the supplier because it doesn't make for a high chance of success. If you only have one shot at a first impression, and if the first impression has a chance to be something that's not a cold call, it's in everybody's interests for that to be the case.
I definitely want to highlight one of the things that you said about the elevator pitch and that one story of the guy who came in from Texas or wherever, and you bought his gin on the spot. You know, was that an elevator pitch, or was that just a guy speaking from his heart?
I think it was him speaking from his heart. I mean, hopefully you're able to get to the point where the delta between these two things is zero, although that's difficult in an age of elevator pitches. But I could tell that this was a well-worn story for this person. You know, I probably wasn't the first person he had spoken to that day. I probably wasn't the last person he was going to speak to that day. But at the same time, delivering the same story, the same authentic story from your heart over and over again is very difficult, but it's a great way to achieve success. And I'm sure the suppliers that are listening feel that statement deeply, because I'm sure you spend your days talking from the heart and getting turned down. And I wish it weren't so.
Yeah, it's a tough gig for all parties. All right, Patrick, thank you so much for your time. So Patrick Smith from the Union Square Hospitality Group, he opens up bars professionally, except for the next 6 months he's off, so don't bother him. He's at home raising a future happy child. So Patrick, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, comments, or thoughts, please leave them in the comments. Again, this is pre-recorded, but Patrick will be able to see them a little bit later. Patrick, thanks again.
Thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers, y'all. Thank you.